Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. This is Emma. I am so glad you could join me for another chilling session of stories from the shadows. For those who tuned in last time, you'll undoubtedly remember the incredibly intense story from a young woman in Arkansas. A harrowing tale about the hauntings involving her grandparents' spirits. The story resonated deeply with so many of you, and it also raised some important questions. Before we dive into today's new tales, I want to take a moment to clarify a couple of details from her story that many of you have asked about. A lot of you were wondering why, after her grandmother was being so terribly and cruelly mistreated by her Aunt Carol, the family didn't just move her into our storyteller's home. She reached out to me again to explain the difficult, almost impossible circumstances they were facing. Firstly, the family arrangement was deeply rooted in inheritance, a promise bound to property. Aunt Carol had been given the large, original family home with the explicit, spoken understanding that it was her sacred duty to care for her parents in their old age. Secondly, Aunt Carol and her husband were financially very stable. They both held well-paying government jobs and had more than enough resources to provide proper care. In stark, tragic contrast, our storyteller's parents were given only a small, 8-unit block of rental rooms. They lived in the first unit themselves, a space no larger than any of the other cramped rentals. A tiny box, maybe 20 feet wide and only 12 feet deep, with a small, claustrophobic loft. It was barely enough room for her parents, let alone an elderly, infirm grandmother. Furthermore, and this is the hardest part to share, her father, as the eldest son, had been spoiled rotten his entire life. This entitlement, left unchecked, curdled into a severe drinking problem as an adult. When he drank, the man he was supposed to be dissolved, replaced by a monster. He became abusive towards his wife and his children. They lived in a constant state of quiet terror, walking on eggshells, praying he wouldn't drink. They were terrified that if they brought his frail mother into their home, she would simply become another victim of his drunken, unpredictable rages. The second point of clarification is about the grandparents' ghosts. The storyteller, whom we'll call Clara, wanted to make it very clear that it was her grandmother's spirit who was the malevolent one. It was her grandmother who was trying to pull her into the afterlife, to take her with her out of a twisted, spectral loneliness. Her grandfather's spirit, in contrast, was actually appearing to protect her, to intervene and physically stop his wife from harming their beloved grandchild. With these heartbreaking details in mind, I hope we can all view her family's situation with a bit more compassion. Every family has its struggles, its secrets, and its sorrows, and hers was truly caught in an impossible, tragic position. Now, let's move on to today's stories. We'll start with another short but deeply unsettling experience from that same young woman, Clara. This one involves a gift that was meant to bring peace, but instead brought a recurring, relentless nightmare. The cursed bracelet. Clara told me that her friends all know she is what you might call spiritually sensitive. It's not a gift she asked for, but a state of being she has had to live with her entire life. She's always been prone to attracting paranormal attention, a lighthouse for lost and sometimes malevolent souls, and has had more than her fair share of encounters with ghosts and other entities. Because of this, her close friend, Sophie, wanted desperately to help. One year, Sophie took a trip to Mount Magazine, a place in Arkansas known for its stunning, panoramic views, but also for a certain palpable spiritual energy that attracts hikers, mystics, and tourists alike. The air there feels different, thinner, older. While there, she visited one of the little shops that sell artisanal goods and spiritual items. Its air thick with the scent of sage and sandalwood. She found a beautiful bracelet made of polished, dark stone beads, each one cool and heavy in her palm. She bought it for Clara, hoping with all her heart that it would act as a protective charm, a shield to bring her peace and ward off any unwelcome spirits. When Sophie gave it to her, Clara was overjoyed. The bracelet was lovely. The stones, a deep, swirling black. And she was touched by the thoughtful, loving gesture. She put it on immediately. The cool weight of it, a comforting presence on her wrist. She was filled with a sense of hope, a fragile belief that maybe, finally, she wouldn't have to deal with the crushing weight of sleep paralysis or the terrifying nightmares that so often plagued her nights. But she was wrong. So terribly wrong. The very first night she wore the bracelet to bed, she was plunged into a horrific, hyper-realistic dream. In it, a woman dressed in a flowing white gown was chasing her through a dead, grey forest. The woman's long, dark hair was like a curtain of black silk, completely obscuring her face. But in her hand, she brandished a large, gleaming kitchen knife that caught the pale. Sick, moonlight, as Clara ran, her lungs burning, the woman's voice, a raspy, venomous hiss filled with a bottomless hate, echoed behind her, screaming the same two sentences over and over. You have to die. You have to die for me. Clara ran and ran. The forest floor, a treacherous mess of roots and thorns, desperately chanting protective prayers in her mind. The words, a frantic, silent shield. Finally, with a gut-wrenching lurch, she jolted awake. Her body was ice cold, yet she was drenched in a clammy sweat, as if she'd run a marathon. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Terrified, she lay awake for a long time, staring into the shadows of her room, reciting prayers until the first gentle light of dawn crept through her window. For the next 3 nights, the exact same nightmare returned. A relentless, terrifying loop from which there was no escape. The white gown, the hidden face, the gleaming knife, and a hateful, screaming voice. She noticed the pattern. Every night she wore the bracelet, the woman in white came for her. Suspicious, her hope curdling into dread, she decided to experiment. For a few nights, she took the bracelet off before sleeping, placing it on her nightstand. On those nights, she slept peacefully, her mind a quiet, blessedly empty sea, with no dreams at all. A few days later, she started to doubt herself. Her logical mind warred with her terror. This bracelet came from a spiritual place on a mountain, she thought, turning the cool beads over in her fingers. It's meant for protection. It's a gift from my best friend. How could it possibly be causing this? She decided to give it one more try, to prove herself wrong. That night, she slipped the cool beads back onto her wrist. Instantly, the moment she fell asleep, the nightmare returned. Just as visceral, just as terrifying as before. The woman in white, the knife, the desperate chase, the screaming promise of her death. The next morning, without a second thought, her hands shaking, she snatched the bracelet from her wrist and threw it deep into the trash can. And just like that, the woman in white vanished from her dreams and has never, ever returned. The dormitory of the dead. Now, We come to the story that Clara says was, without a doubt, the single most terrifying experience of her entire life. It happened when she left her troubled home to attend college in Fayetteville. Initially, Clara wanted to get an off-campus apartment. The idea of living in a crowded and often grimy college dormitory filled her with a unique kind of dread. It was partly because she cherished her privacy and didn't want roommates, and partly because she was deeply afraid of what ghosts might linger in a building with so much history, so much concentrated human emotion. But her move to Fayetteville was rushed, and she couldn't find a place in time. Her mum convinced her to stay in the dorms temporarily, just until she could find something better. Fortunately, she was assigned to a room on the first floor of residence hall, which made it a bit more palatable, closer to the earth. To escape! For the first few months, her own room was quiet, blessedly normal. The true horror, she would soon discover, wasn't lurking in her room, but across the grassy courtyard, in room 206 of the men's dorm. As luck, or perhaps fate, would have it, her best friend since the 10th grade, a guy named Leo, was attending the same university and living in that very room. Because they were so close, Clara spent a lot of her free time hanging out in his room. She was a bit of a tomboy back then, she explained, often dressing in hip-hop style clothing, so she fit in easily with Leo and his male roommates. They'd spend their afternoon sprawled on the floor, playing cards and just relaxing, the air filled with laughter and easy camaraderie. One afternoon, while they were in the middle of a card game, a sudden, overwhelming wave of exhaustion washed over Clara. It wasn't a normal sleepiness. It was a heavy, leaden feeling, an unnatural force that seemed to pull her down, draining all the energy from her body. She told Leo she couldn't play anymore and lay down on his bed, which was against the far wall, to take what she thought would be a quick nap. The moment she closed her eyes, she fell into a vivid, terrifying dream. She saw herself walking out of the dorm building and heading towards the campus bus stop. The sun was bright, the day normal, but as she walked, she became aware of a man following her. A deep, cold, instinctual fear coiled in her gut, telling her that this man was not alive, he was a ghost, and he was chasing her. She picked up her pace, her heart starting to hammer against her ribs. And he matched it. She broke into a run, her sneakers pounding against the pavement, and he stayed right behind her, his footsteps silent, but his presence a suffocating weight on her back. She screamed, her voice thin and reedy in the dream air. "Help me! There's a ghost! Somebody! Please help me!" She ran for what felt like an eternity, finally reaching a city bus that was waiting at the stop, its engine idling. She scrambled aboard, gasping for breath, and collapsed into a seat near the front. On the bus, a woman with a kind face was selling tickets from a small dispenser. "Where are you headed?" "Honey," the ticket woman asked, her voice warm. "Please," Clara panted, her words tumbling out. "A ghost is chasing me. Did you see him?" The woman's face broke into a wide, horrifying grin, her mouth stretched in an unnatural, impossible smile, her teeth seeming to multiply. She chuckled, a dry, rattling sound like dead leaves skittering across pavement. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice now a chillingly cheerful mockery of her earlier tone. "I am dead too. There's nothing to be afraid of." Pure, absolute terror seized Clara. She scrambled over the seats and threw herself out the bus door, running blindly into a landscape she didn't recognize. a grey and featureless world. As she ran, she began desperately chanting a mantra for protection, the words a lifeline in the suffocating fear. After a few moments, she felt herself start to wake up. But this wasn't like waking up from a normal nightmare. Her body felt impossibly heavy, as if it were made of lead. Pinned to the mattress, she couldn't open her eyes, couldn't move a single muscle. She felt trapped in a horrifying state between worlds, half conscious and screaming on the inside, but completely, utterly paralyzed. Then, everything shifted with a strange, weightless sensation. She opened her eyes, but she wasn't looking through them from inside her body. She was standing at the foot of Leo's bed, looking down at her own physical form, peacefully asleep. It was an out-of-body experience. The room around her was completely real, hyper-detailed, not a dream. She saw Leo's roommate, Jason, walk out of the ensuite bathroom, a towel around his neck. She watched as he went to the mirror and began to lather his face with shaving cream, overjoyed to see someone, to have a link to the real world. She rushed towards him. "Jason! Jason! Can you see me?" she yelled, her voice echoing in her own spiritual ears. "I am standing right here!" But he gave no sign of hearing her. He just continued with his shaving. The scrape of the razor, the only sound, completely unaware of her frantic, invisible presence. She looked around the room and saw her other friends, sitting on their own beds, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of their phones as they scrolled through social media. She screamed at them, pleaded with them, but it was as if she didn't exist. A horrifying, soul-crushing realization dawned on her. She was a spirit, somehow separated from her body. Panic, cold and sharp, set in. She stood there, a ghost in her best friend's dorm room, desperately chanting, "Soul, return to body. Soul, enter the body." She repeated the phrase over and over, her spiritual voice pleading, begging. After what felt like an eternity of this terrifying separation, she felt a powerful, violent lurch, and her consciousness slammed back into her physical form with the force of a physical blow. Her eyes snapped open. She was awake, truly awake. The feeling of the rough blanket against her skin, a shocking, grounding sensation. It took her a full 5 minutes for the shock to wear off, for her to be able to speak. The very first thing she did was ask Jason, her voice trembling, "Hey, did you just come out of the bathroom to shave?" Jason stared at her. His razor paused mid-stroke, his face a mask of complete bafflement. "Yeah, but you were fast asleep. How could you possibly know that?" She then turned to her other friends and described exactly what she had seen them doing on their phones, which apps they were on, which posts they were looking at. They were all stunned into silence, their faces pale, asking how she knew, how it was possible for her to see what they were doing while she was sound asleep. After that experience, Clara started asking around about room 206. She eventually met an older student named Mark who had lived in the dorms for a while. He listened to her story, his expression growing grim. He told her a chilling story. "Years ago," he said, "a young couple, a male and a female student, deeply in love and deeply in despair, had hanged themselves together in that very room. And the girl," he added, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "used to work a part-time job to make extra money selling tickets on the city bus." Clara felt a cold dread wash over her. a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning, as she remembered the ticket woman's horrifying, stretched grin in her dream. From that day on, she never, ever set foot inside room 206 again. The hauntings, however, didn't end there. They had found her. During the summer break after her sophomore year, Clara had to stay on campus for a job. All of her roommates went home, leaving her completely alone in their cavernous, 8-person suite. The silence was a heavy, watchful thing. The first few nights were uneventful. Then, one evening, after a long, happy phone call with her boyfriend, she put her phone down on her nightstand and fell asleep almost instantly. Her bed was the bottom bunk, right next to the door, and she always kept a privacy curtain drawn around it, creating a small, dark cocoon. She slipped into a dream where she was happily chatting on the phone with her boyfriend again, reliving the pleasant conversation. Suddenly, a harsh, angry voice, laced with venom, hissed from the empty bunk directly above her. "Be quiet! Why are you always on the phone laughing and making so much noise? Don't you ever shut up?" The moment she heard the voice, her entire body seized up, locked in the familiar, terrifying grip of sleep paralysis. In this trapped state, her eyes were open, and she saw a figure leaning over the edge of the top bunk, its head inverted. It was a girl's head, hanging upside down, staring directly at her with black, empty eyes. The face was a ghastly, sickly blue-green color, the color of rot and decay. One of its hands, skeletal and long, snaked down from above her curtain, while another reached up from the darkness beneath her bed. Both were clawing, grasping, trying to grab her. Clara's mind reeled in terror at the impossible length the arms must have possessed to reach her from those angles. Trapped and terrified, she fell back on the only defense she had, her silent, mental chanting. The prayers were a desperate, frantic drumbeat in her mind. Slowly, agonizingly, she felt the paralysis begin to recede. The instant she could move, she threw herself from the bed, burst out of her room, and ran screaming into the empty, moonlit courtyard. She risked a glance back and saw the horrifying, green-faced girl chasing her, its movements jerky and unnatural. Across the quad, she saw a single light on in another dorm window. A student was sitting at a desk, studying. Hope surged through her. Clara screamed for help, her voice raw and shredded with terror. But the student didn't even look up, didn't flinch. It was as if she was invisible, inaudible, trapped in a nightmarish pocket dimension with this entity. Realizing no one could help her, she stood in the middle of the dark, silent courtyard and prayed with all her might. Her eyes squeezed shut. With a violent, bone-jarring jolt, she woke up in her own bed, still screaming out loud. It had been a dream, but the terror felt so profoundly real it had physically manifested. She looked at her clock. It was 3 a.m., the witching hour. The silence of the empty 8-person room was deafening, amplifying the frantic pounding of her own heart. Trembling, she grabbed her phone to call her boyfriend for comfort, for a human voice to anchor her to reality. But the phone, which she had just added credit to that very morning, displayed a stark message: no balance. She tried to turn on her mobile data, but it wouldn't connect. After fumbling through the menus with shaking hands, she managed to get some emergency credit from her provider. But now, when she tried to call her boyfriend, the calls wouldn't go through, dying without a single ring. This was bizarre, he always answered. No matter the time. The convergence of events was too much, too specific, to be a coincidence. She was being isolated. For the rest of that lonely, terrifying summer, Clara slept with meditation music playing all night, but she never once had a truly peaceful rest. As soon as the summer ended, she moved out of the dorms for good. She found a small house to rent off campus, right by the gentle curve of the White River. Her parents came and had the place thoroughly blessed, and for a full year, she lived in absolute peace. But she grew complacent. The quiet lulled her into a false sense of security, and she stopped her daily prayers and protections, and the nightmares returned. This time, she dreamed she was standing at the very edge of the riverbank, so close that one small step would send her plunging into the cold, dark water. She felt an immense, crushing weight on her shoulders, as if someone were riding on her back. She forced herself to look over her shoulder and saw a man sitting on top of her, his legs wrapped tightly around her neck. He leaned in close, his breath cold on her skin, and whispered in her ear, "Do you believe I can push you into this river and make you die right now?" She knew what to do. She began to chant. She woke up. The next day, she bought fruit and incense as an offering and renewed her spiritual practices with a new, fierce dedication. The nightmares stopped, but for months afterward, she suffered from a deep, persistent, agonizing pain in her neck and shoulders that no medicine could touch. Finally, her worried mother took her to a spiritual healer who gave her several blessed charms to wear around her neck. Thankfully, Clara says that since she received those charms and has remained diligent and respectful in her faith, the terrifying dreams and ghostly encounters have finally, blessedly, ceased. The Spirit on Facebook. Our last story tonight is very different. It was sent in by a listener named Maya, and it raises a profound and perhaps unanswerable question. Is this a case of a powerful spirit attachment? Or is it the product of deep love, unresolved grief, and an incredibly vivid imagination? Maya's story begins about 6 years ago. She was a team leader at a large, noisy electronics factory. Back then, Facebook was a different landscape. People posted text-based statuses about their feelings and their daily lives far more often than photos. Maya was a frequent poster, sharing her thoughts and moods online. She soon noticed that one particular Facebook account was an incredibly active follower. This person liked and commented on every single thing she posted, often within moments. The profile was anonymous, using a nickname instead of a real name. The profile picture was intriguing and mysterious. It wasn't a face, but a photo of a man's back, wearing a thin, white dress shirt, through which you could clearly see a large, intricate spiderweb tattoo. This mystery man was uncannily intuitive. Whenever Maya was feeling happy, sad, or stressed about work or life, he would send her a message at the perfect moment, offering words of comfort and profound understanding. It was as if he could read her mind, or perhaps her heart. He told her that he worked at the same factory, on the very same production line, just on a different shift. Their relationship remained entirely online until one day, a massive and chaotic labor protest forced the factory to shut down, giving all employees an unexpected day off. As Maya and her work friends stood outside in the confused crowd, wondering what to do, she received a message from him. His name, he told her, was Ethan, and he asked if she wanted to get coffee. She was intrigued, but also cautious. She agreed. but only on the condition that all her friends could come along. When she finally met him, he was even more striking in person, tall, incredibly handsome, and with the quiet, gentle manners of a true gentleman. After that first meeting, they began talking and hanging out much more often, becoming very close friends. A complicated, painful situation developed. Maya started to have strong, undeniable feelings for Ethan, but she already had a boyfriend. To make matters worse, her own best friend also developed a huge crush on Ethan. Maya could tell from the way Ethan talked to her, the way his eyes found hers across a room, the way he always dropped subtle hints and compliments meant only for her, that he was interested in her, not her friend. Feeling conflicted, torn between her heart and her loyalty, and wanting to give her friend a chance at happiness, Maya made the difficult decision to pull away from Ethan. She began to intentionally ignore his flirtations and limit their time together, creating a painful distance between them. Sometime later, Maya and her boyfriend decided to get married. When she handed out the wedding invitations at work, her colleagues were stunned. They all assumed from her clothes, magnetic friendship with Ethan, that they were the couple destined for the altar. "I thought you two were getting married," they'd exclaim in shock. Maya would just laugh it off. A hollow sound. No, Ethan and I are just friends. About a month after her wedding, Ethan quit his job at the factory. No goodbyes, no notice. She also noticed he had unfriended her on Facebook. The silence was absolute. Maya was deeply hurt by his cold, abrupt departure. So, when she later heard through the workplace grapevine that he had fallen seriously ill, her pride and her hurt kept her from visiting him. 2 weeks passed. One day, a work issue kept her late, and she went to the company cafeteria for lunch long after the usual rush had subsided. An older colleague came over and sat down at her table, her expression somber. "Maya," she said quietly, "you haven't heard. Ethan passed away. We were all at his funeral. Everyone was asking where you were." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. She felt the air leave her lungs, the world tilting on its axis. She couldn't eat, couldn't think. She kept asking, "Ethan? Which Ethan?" But she already knew. A cold certainty blooming in her chest. "The one who was so in love with you." "Of course," her colleague replied, her voice soft with pity. Immediately, Maya left work and drove straight to Ethan's house. A desperate, frantic need to see for herself, to prove this nightmare wasn't real. It was. As she parked her car, her hands shaking on the steering wheel, she could see a memorial table set up in the living room, his funeral portrait displayed prominently. She walked inside, her body numb with shock and a crushing tidal wave of guilt. Why hadn't she visited him? Why had she let her stupid pride get in the way? She stood before his picture, unable to meet its smiling gaze, and offered a silent, heartbroken prayer. After that day, her life was never quite the same. She noticed that whenever she was under extreme stress from work or feeling overwhelmed by a deep, personal sadness, she would have a dream. In the dream, a man would appear to comfort her. At first, she thought nothing of it, but it was always the same man. And while she could never see his face because he always had his back to her, she could see his back. And on it, visible through a thin, white shirt, was a large, intricate spiderweb tattoo. It was Ethan. For years, this has been her reality. Whenever she misses him so intensely that she finds herself crying, he appears in her dreams that night. He never speaks. He never shows his face. He simply takes her by the hand and leads her away to beautiful, peaceful places, sun-drenched beaches, quiet forests, serene mountaintops. And when she wakes up, the sadness is gone. Her mind is clear, and her problems feel solvable. Her life is normal in every other way. She has a happy, loving relationship with her husband. But this connection to Ethan is a constant, bittersweet, secret presence. She has told 2 close friends about it. One, a pragmatist, told her it's just her mind's way of coping with grief, a beautiful fantasy built from unresolved feelings. The other, more spiritual friend, he believes Ethan's soul has stayed behind to watch over her, and that she needs to find a way to help him move on to the afterlife. And so, Maya ends her story with a question for all of you. Is she being haunted by a loving spirit? A soul so attached to her that he cannot leave this world? Or is this elaborate, days-long experience simply the product of a powerful imagination fueled by love, guilt, and profound loss? Let me know what you think in the comments below. It's a fascinating and deeply moving question. That's all the time we have for tonight. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed these stories, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.